We need to talk about the show Adolescence that is trending on the internet right now, and more specifically men's response to this, because honestly, I am tired. And I think we're all tired. But the fact that an entire show was made beautifully, I think every single person on this planet should watch it.
I'm always skeptical when people record themselves practically in tears and then post it to social media. And I get it. For some people, they're really feeling some type of way in that moment, but there are too many of them making content like this for attention. Anyway, whether or not this is what this creator's doing, there's no way to tell, but let's carry on and see what she's got to say.
Highlighting the problems in society that lead to a lot of the neglect and the children we're seeing, and specifically centering it on young men and young men's related issues, especially surrounding their mental health. And especially the way they managed to do it, and the way that this kid was still dangerous. He had still done really bad things, but you still found yourself empathizing with him at moments and feeling bad for him. Right? This show truly had you understanding the problems that lead these boys down the red pill pipeline, and it really has you feeling the way that they feel as it's happening.
I've heard a few people talking about how men responded to this show, but to be honest, I haven't really seen anything in the comments in the videos I've seen. I even hopped over to Rollo Tomasi's channel because he made a video reacting to this series, but there was nothing going on over there either. If you guys have seen any wild responses from guys about this show, share them with me in the comments. I fully agree with what she's saying about the lead character, because despite the crime he committed, you can kind of see how he came to the conclusion that this was the right and only way to handle things. You can even see how and why a teenager would look for answers about women and dating in the red pill space, especially if it's something they're struggling with. But the reality is, a lot of grown-ass men aren't ready for red pill truths, so you can see how things can get complicated when you have teens watching content from certain creators. Like I said in my own little review of this show, a lot of young minds aren't fully capable of dissecting some of the lessons that can be learned from the red pill. And this issue is made even worse when they don't have anyone in their real life they can talk to about this sort of stuff.
This was their moment to talk about themselves and their mental health that they're always going around pretending that they care about so much more than anything women have to say. And their response to this show is to miss the point entirely and to take nothing from it and to flip it on women.
Like I said at the start of this video, I haven't really seen any wild comments about this show, and the video she made reviewing it was taken down, so there's no way for me to see what guys were talking about. That said, there were some people arguing in the comments section of this video though.
What are men saying about this show? How are they blaming women? I'm confused.
I've seen men talking about how it wasn't the boy's fault because he was bullied by the girl he murdered, as if he didn't bully her, and as if it's an excuse for murder.
It's a take on toxic femininity.
You think toxic femininity means it's okay to murder someone?
You think toxic femininity means it's okay to bully somebody so bad they want to murder?
He saw and shared her nudes. She rejected him. He murdered her. I don't think any amount of bullying excuses literal murder, the taking of someone else's life.
To be honest, I haven't seen men comment, but I have seen a lot of women comment, which is worrying in itself. We care because men's issues affect us, but they don't care about how patriarchy negatively affects men.
I really wish I could have seen the original review she posted because I'm super curious about what was being said, but I guess we'll never know.
To the point where I took the time to watch it, write down everything I think they accomplished beautifully, all the things that I think we should talk about. I made this almost 6-minute long video, giving them this time and attention.
And we're going to get into that in a minute, so get your coffee and popcorn ready.
And they report spammed the heck out of it, as you can see. I'm going to have to upload it somewhere else so we can talk about it. Keep an eye on my YT because I do think these are extremely important conversations that we should be having, despite the fact that the men who have been pretending to advocate for them all this time suddenly don't want to be having them. I think that reaction right there from grown men, that's the takeaway from this show that we didn't realize we needed, but we probably should have seen coming.
Now, if what she's saying is true, this is the kind of thing that makes the red pill look like a joke, and the guys who consume it come off as being unhinged and insecure. For me, this shit's very annoying, Because there are a lot of red pill creators who always talk about how emotional women are and how they can't think logically or handle stressful situations. But when someone says the slightest negative thing about them, they lose it and get caught up in their feelings. The red pill is nothing but a truth revelation and shouldn't do anything more than equip men with the knowledge and motivation to move through life in the most optimum way possible. If there really were men who went out of their way to report spam her review video, that's some weak shit and lets me know that these guys don't really have much of a purpose in life. If what she said made these guys feel a certain way, they should have articulated their thoughts and responded to whatever it was she said that rubbed them the wrong way. In any case, report spamming her content just makes them look weak and unable to handle their shit.
Young men were given a show that amazingly explains their experience, how they fall victim to these things, and the thought process behind what leads up to the schmielence against women without excusing it, and even at times having you almost empathize and connect with those men, and they squandered it. So forgive women when we're finding it harder and harder to say that we care at all about your issues, when y'all don't seem to care yourselves.
I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, it'd be interesting to see someone like her and a creator like MTR actually sit down and talk about the show at length. I honestly think there'd be a lot of value in something like that, so maybe we should get on his ass about it. Pause. Anyway, let's jump into her full review of the show and see where we agree and disagree about things.
The real-life events that inspired Netflix's Adolescence are increasing at an alarming rate.
All right, we need to talk about Adolescence. The miniseries that is #1 on Netflix right now has the entire internet divided, and it has the Manosphere and Andrew Tate specifically up in arms.
I didn't even know Andrew Tate responded to the messaging in this show. And while I couldn't find him talking about the series directly, I did find the clip he was reacting to, which was this.
I think one of the great things we can do as men is just set the example that to be vulnerable is okay. We're talking about influences, right? We're talking about the Andrew Tates and whatever influence in young men. We can influence young men just the same by continually bombarding them with those positive messages and letting them understand that to be vulnerable, you know, to cry, to talk to people about how you feel, to be in places, in women's spaces and be cool and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's kind of what I try and do with my boys. You know, is just let them understand, like, I'm willing to look like an idiot, you know, I'm willing to be vulnerable, I'm willing to...
We're learning as well.
You know, it's like everyone's learning, we're all kind of going through that process, but I think we have to kind of break the barriers of kind of what masculinity means in general.
Anyway, before I share my thoughts, this is what Andrew Tate had to say about it. Super disappointed. Asher D sold out with bullshit that I cause stabbing as if I don't preach the total opposite, especially with a past like his. Everyone sells their soul in the entertainment industry or you don't get the acting jobs. He knows it's bullshit. Coulda stood on business but was afraid of backlash. Guess he isn't so solid after all. The thing is, young men have been violent for the longest time, long before the red pill was even a thing. And this is something Asher D would know, because he was deep in that gang shit back in the day. Now, to be fair, that was a long time ago, and since then, he's obviously grown and changed. Personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said, and he's right in that parents need to be more aware of what's going on with their kids before they start turning to online creators for life advice. As I keep saying, I don't think the base message behind a lot of the ideas in the red pill space are wrong. But how certain messages are shared amongst young people isn't something that should be ignored. The whole thing about being vulnerable is something I'm still on the fence about, because while it sounds all good when it's talked about during interviews like this, how people actually respond to vulnerable men in the real world can be a very different thing, often backfiring on guys who open up, especially when they open up to their partners. I mean, we've all heard stories about men being torn down after wearing their hearts on their sleeve. So when it comes to this men being vulnerable thing, that's also something that needs to be talked about. Anyway, let's get back to the main video.
If you haven't watched the show already, that's okay, but it is now my number 3 you have to watch this, right next to Maid and Promising Young Woman. And based off those first 2 titles, you know that is a hard list to make for me. There's so many details that I don't see people talking about and we need to discuss. One of the first things I thought when watching this is that both men and women are going to have 2 completely different viewing experiences of this show, because this is probably all really normalized to them, and watching this as a woman is absolutely crazy. And given the response online, I wasn't far off.
People have all sorts of responses to shows like this. There'll be men and women who hate it, men and women who understand and appreciate it, as well as men and women who simply don't get it. Personally, I'd class myself as someone who understands and appreciates what the show was trying to do, even if I disagree with what a lot of people think the red pill is. But that's a PR problem that's probably never going to go away.
So obviously the series itself is specifically highlighting the crisis of teenage boys falling down the red pill pipeline and the byproducts of that and, violence against women.
And this is what I mean about people not really understanding what the red pill is. Or maybe I'm the one who's got this shit all wrong. When it comes to the red pill, one of the things that gets talked about a lot is dating single moms and the potential pitfalls of doing so. When I first came across this sort of content, honestly, this wasn't something I ever put much thought into. But afterwards, it did make me consider the drawbacks of doing such a thing. Now, did this change the way I treat single moms or women in general? No, not at all. But now, if I was to go down the road of dating a single mom, at least I'd be aware of the risks that come with it, rather than going in blind, which would have been the case in the past. And to me, that's all the red pill is. All this other stuff that gets tacked onto it, or content creators who want to make a quick buck by selling $1,000 courses, is another matter entirely.
But it does a really good job of empathizing with all of the characters and highlighting this from every angle. If you don't already know, not really a spoiler alert, the main character, a 13-year-old boy, ends up unaliving one of his classmates who is a woman. That's the part that sadly has a lot of the internet divided right now. But before we get into that, I love the way both the parents talk about how they feel they could have done more and they didn't connect with their child enough, but they specifically choose to really focus on the dad and his perspective and his feeling of guilt around this.
I fully agree. And the final episode that focuses on the dad and how he felt like he could have done more is powerful and should really get men thinking about how they communicate with their sons. Rather than leaving things to chance or having your kids trying to learn life lessons from random people online, you should really make the time to teach them about the world, how it really works, and how they should operate in it if they want the best possible chance of finding success. Like a lot of guys, the boy in this show had a tough time when it came to dealing with things like rejection, which is something parents should prepare their kids for so they don't go out into the world wearing Disney goggles. When kids come across red pill concepts like the 80-20 rule, they're gonna have a tough time understanding it, especially if they don't have anyone in their life they can talk to directly. And while there are studies out there that back this sort of stuff up, what does that mean for young men? How can they increase their chances of finding someone to build a life with rather than giving in to all the doom and gloom? That's the sort of thing that needs to be relayed to young men so they don't lose all hope and think that they'll never find their place.
He talks about how, back in the day, he used to try harder to connect with his son, but then he started working more and things just fell through the cracks. And then they got him that computer and then he was locked away in his room all the time and they never really saw him. It's interesting that they also raised a daughter who turned out very differently. You'll see throughout the show that the women are held to different standards, right? They're expected to excel, behave a little bit better. And I don't see enough people specifically talking about the school scenes. When they go into the schools are overrun, right? The children are wild and kind of running rampant. They're talking back. They are disrespectful to the teachers. The teachers are kind of just taking it. All of the classrooms just seem to be watching videos, and the lack of connection even between the teachers and the students. When they interview the teachers, they highlighted this. They don't really know much about the individual students.
Yeah, the school system's kind of terrible when it comes to how they manage students and the issues they might be dealing with. It's all well and good to say kids should go to their teachers if they have issues with things like bullying. But if the adults don't have the ability or will to effectively do anything about it, what's the point?
Right, because there's too much going on and there's just too many students to keep track of. And if you'll notice, the theme throughout a lot of this film is all of this is a byproduct of capitalism. But this overall lack of human connection and attention leads to the very obvious deep insecurities that we see throughout the film in this boy. He has zero sense of self, and you see that constantly in the psychologist scenes when he is begging for affirmations. And as always, this is the perfect recipe that led him to the red pill pipeline manosphere to try and find some sense of community and validation.
And this is why I'm always saying that young people need mentors. people they can talk to about things they might not properly understand.
And whilst he openly denies consuming that kind of content because he says the kids at school make fun of kids like that, he continues to use their terminology and show that he adheres to their ideologies.
See, I'm not sure if I'd say the red pill is an ideology, because it's not a system of beliefs or anything like that. For the most part, the red pill just means revealing the truth, and you can be red-pilled about pretty much anything in life. It doesn't just apply to dating. To give you an example, you can get red-pilled on something like marriage, and all it'd mean in this sense is that you've become aware of the risks that come with getting married and what could happen if you find yourself in the middle of a messy divorce. The reason you could say someone was red-pilled about marriage in this sense is because a lot of people walk down the aisle and don't give a second thought to the risk they're taking, and because of that, plenty of people get burned for it. The red pill isn't there to tell people that they should or shouldn't get married. It's just there to make them aware of what could happen if things don't work out. Now, if you want to start talking about particular creators and the messages they're putting out into the world, that's another matter entirely. But I don't think being red-pilled about anything in life is the basis of any ideology in and of itself.
Especially when he talks about what he thinks is appropriate for 13-year-olds to be doing with women at that age. They have convinced him that he should be doing a whole lot more. This means he either is consuming that content and he's lying about it in shame, or that content is so ingrained in young people that they don't even realize they're all adhering to it.
Okay, so I remember what it was like to be 13. And even though there was no such thing as the red pill back then, I promise you, people were doing a lot more than just giving each other kisses on the cheek. This isn't anything new, but maybe it depends on where you grew up and the kind of environment you were in. But there was nothing shocking about what he thought other teens his age were getting up to.
He also has some very obvious issues with authority and clearly the need to feel like he's in control and he's in power, to the point where the psychologist woman has to trick him into thinking that he's in control to get information out of him. And throughout all of this, as that content trains these men to do, he is convinced that he is the victim, he is innocent, and he goes through insane lengths to continue to self-soothe and justify the behaviors. Which brings us to the horrific response of the red pill men in the show that is being mirrored by those men in real life. Like, this show nailed it. Both the character, the men in the show, and the men reacting in real life are justifying her being unalived because she bullied him.
See, while I can't comment on all red pill creators, from the ones I've seen, none of them advise men to feel like victims. The content I have seen is all about how guys should step their game up, get in shape, make more money, and whatever else they can do to set themselves up for a better future. I've never seen anyone talk about throwing in the towel and being helpless, but if you want to talk about the black pill and what those guys like to discuss, maybe you'd be onto something. But to be honest, I haven't seen much of that content, and from what I understand, I don't even think shit like that's even allowed on YouTube.
Which, I mean, talk about running face first into the point and still not learning the lesson. What he explains to the psychologist in the show is that his friend got a bunch of inappropriate pictures of the young girls that are in their class and spread them around. And they chose to specifically go after and make fun of this one 13-year-old girl's body, and she was really getting it the worst. And even he was agreeing with them, but he decided that since she is vulnerable, right, and probably feels bad enough about herself, he's going to ask her out. Of course, that girl rejects him because of the way she has been treated by all of them. And that's absolutely nowhere near an appropriate time to be asking out a girl.
And this is why boys like this need guidance. Because if he had someone to talk to, they could have told him that what he did or was about to do is a weak-ass move. Then maybe shift his focus to other things so he can work on becoming the best version of himself. Back when I was in school, we had mentors who'd come in specifically to talk to the black kids because they knew we were in an area where turning to crime would be easy for us, and the whole gang lifestyle shit's pretty attractive to a young boy. I'm not sure if this is something they even do these days, but honestly, without that, I probably would have made a few stupid decisions back then. But that's another story.
Of course, he responds by continuing to insult her and her appearance, and so she leaves like 2 or maybe 3 comments on his Instagram that are literally just like emojis of the red pill and a few other things, right? Just directly calling out his misogyny, his hypocrisy, and the way he treats women.
Guys being able to take rejection on the chin is 100% something that needs to be talked about more. Nobody likes getting rejected, but these days, it seems like something we're avoiding more and more. So whenever it does happen, it stings like a bitch because people have no experience with it. I remember having a conversation about rejection with my dad when I was a kid, and even though I can't recall exactly what it was about, I'm pretty sure I was crushing hard on some girl at the time.
And then some of their other classmates liked it, and with that, they decided to justify unaliving that girl. That's what they think a proper reaction to something they put into motion is. And the real spoiler alert is that at the end of the series, he finally changes his verdict to guilty, indicating that perhaps he has reflected a tiny bit, but it is far too late. That girl is no longer alive. All over an Instagram comment. And the saddest part is this is reflecting what's happening in real life. Violence against women, specifically young women, has risen. And we desperately need more media like this, calling for some sort of action.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of thing can escalate quickly. And because young people are vulnerable to certain messages or completely misunderstand what's being talked about, they can end up doing some crazy shit. So yeah, while I don't particularly agree with her on what the red pill is at its core, I fully understand how young people can get confused if they're getting all their lessons about dating from content creators. I think what'd be interesting and helpful at this point would be for Andrea, the creator I'm reacting to today, to go over and break down the talking points or conversations red pill creators are having on their channels. While I get that the red pill is something she's really against, I'd love for her to go over some of the specific topics that rub her the wrong way. But for now, let me know what you guys thought about this. And if you've seen the show, what did you make of it?